Vaishnava Seva. My understanding is that the theme that the temple has selected for the month is Vaishnava Seva. And I thought it would be nice to connect the theme of Vaishnava Seva with two of the illustrious Vaishnavas who we will be honoring during this class. Yesterday marked the appearance day of Gopala Bhatta Goswami. And today marks the disappearance day of Jayadeva Goswami. So, that's the title. Vaishnava Seva, remembering Gopala Bhatta Goswami and Jayadeva Goswami. Now, Vaishnava Seva. Vaishnava Seva is one of the 5 principal devotional activities mentioned by Rupa Goswami that if we do properly means minimally, without making offense, that they're so potent, any one or combination is so potent that Bhava Bhakti immediately becomes awakened. So let's do Vaishnava Seva by specifically thinking of, remembering the presence in this world, the appearance of Gopala Bhatta Goswami. Now, by nature, these two Vaishnavas and any Vaishnava, their life is, we can say, it's service to Krishna, but service to Krishna means also service to the Vaishnavas. Now, the primary service of Jayadeva Goswami, for those of you that are a little familiar, he was living around the 1200s, before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. He was a poet. He was a Brahmin, and his inclination as a Brahmin was just to be engaged in service to the Lord, without, specifically even, without being married, just being in service to the Lord. So a very nice service he did indeed, started with his acceptance of a wife. The biographies of Jayadeva Goswami's life identify that he was renounced. There was no contemplation at all of becoming a grihasta. He was not inclined. He was not like in the aversion category. He was just not inclined. And he was living in Jagannath Puri. So one fine day, a Brahmana who had for a long time been praying to Lord Jagannath for a son, one fine day he had a daughter. And the daughter grew up a great devotee of Lord Jagannath, very exalted personality, very special devotion to Lord Jagannath. And when she came of marriageable age, one day the Brahmin brought his daughter, Padmavati, before the deity of Jagannath and offered to the deity of Jagannath his daughter, not to marry Jagannath, but she's at your feet, and you please consider the best arrangement for her, knowing her devotion to you. and he heard a voice. Now, there are different versions. He heard a voice in a dream, or he heard a voice. But Jagannath instructed him that I have one nice devotee, very devoted to me, as is your daughter, and you approach him, Jayadeva, and request him to accept your daughter in marriage. This is my arrangement for your daughter. So the Brahmin found out who was this nice devotee, Jayadeva. He went to his residence and introduced his daughter. She came with him, and introduced his daughter and said, I'd like you to accept my daughter in marriage. And he declined. I have no interest, no inclination to be married. You can make some other arrangement for your daughter's marriage. And the Brahmin said, Jagannath has instructed that my daughter should be married to you, so I'm leaving her here with you. And he turned and he left. And there was Jayadeva with a Padmavati standing before him, poor Padmavati. And Jayadeva said, I'm not going to marry, and so you please indicate where it is that you'd like to go, and I'll see that you are taken to that place you'd like to go. And she looked at the ground and started crying and said, Lord Jagannath has given me to you. You are my husband, and if you don't accept me, I will then have to give up my life. And she began crying and crying and fell to the ground. Jayadeva was also a great devotee of Lord Jagannath, and he understood the intensity of her devotion to Lord Jagannath, and in turn, her devotion to him. And so, thank Jagannath, he accepted her as his wife. And a very, very exalted personality. Now, there's many nice things to say about the life of Jayadeva, but his life was dedicated to Krishna. Specifically, the feelings of separation of the associates of Krishna from Krishna when Krishna was not in their presence. Very strong part of his Gita Govinda. And of course, it was a Gita, it was a song meant to be sung, and it was sung, and it still is sung so many hundreds of years later, regularly in the Jagannath temple. The kind of devotion that Jayadeva had for Krishna, I'll narrate two well-known and celebrated events. There's details in his life that different biographers narrate differently, but there's two that are very commonly accepted and as authorized. One of those wonderful events indicates his service to his good wife and his wife's service to him. He, in course of time, he began worshipping a deity of Radha Madhava. The deity of Radha Madhava is a very large deity. Now, just outside Jaipur, and you can visit. Someday, may you visit Jaipur and see the beautiful deity of Radha Madhava. And because he was a Brahmana, he didn't have wealth, but he also wanted to, those of you that have cameras, if you could turn your camera off, That would be really great. Thanks. If you, he didn't have wealth, but he had Gita Govinda. So he made a plan. Now, one of the things that we're recommended not to do is not to speak Krishna Katha for money. But this was his means of maintaining, and so he decided there won't be a violation if I go on a tour, people make donations, and the donations are used not for me or maintenance, but for the deity. It was for a Janmashtami festival. So we went on a tour, and people were very, very attracted to hearing Gita Govinda, naturally. And on his way back to his home to plan his Janmashtami festival, he was robbed. And the robbers not only took whatever wealth he had, but they tied him up and threw him down the bottom of a well. Not very fortunate persons to mistreat a Vaishnava in that way. Not only to steal, but attempted murder. And just left him half alive in the bottom of the well. A nearby king was passing by that well to get some water. And when he saw down in the well there was a person, he arranged for the person to be brought out of the bottom of the well. He didn't know who he was. And he brought him back to his kingdom. And he came to find out that this is the celebrated Jayadeva. And he delighted the king by singing and reciting Gita Govinda. And when he understood who he was, a palanquin was arranged to bring Padmavati to the king's kingdom. And the king decided to have a grand festival and invite all the brahmanas in the nearby area to come and attend this festival where Jayadeva would be reciting Gita Govinda. Big festival. Many people came, and especially many brahmanas, because they knew they would be handsomely rewarded by this very generous king. And in the audience, Jayadeva recognized the robbers dressed as Brahmins because they wanted some money. So they disguised themselves as Brahmins. So Jayadeva called over some guards and gestured in their direction. And they thought, he's telling them that we're the robbers, go get him. But that isn't what he said. He said, please make sure that these men over there, these Brahmins over there, receive some nice contribution. And so the guards went to approach them, and they saw the guards approaching, and so they ran. And the guards ran after them, and they finally caught up with them some distance away. And then the robbers, in disguise as brahmanas, told a big lie, an offensive statement. You don't know who this person is. We know who this person is. We're going to tell you the truth of this person. This person is so bad that it was arranged that we murder him. And because he's so bad, another king arranged. And so as they were speaking lies and offenses against Jayadeva, the earth opened up like a sinkhole, I guess, and they disappeared inside the earth, and the earth closed. Sinkholes don't close. This one closed. And the guards of the king were shocked. So he came back and informed the king what happened. And the king went to Jayadeva and said, do you know who those people were? And Jayadeva said, yes, I know who those people were. They were the robbers that attempted to kill me and took all my money that I was going to use for the Janmashtami festival. And then the king said, well, why did you want to reward them with, nice donation, nice gifts. He said, because they were in need. And I understood their need, and so let their need be fulfilled. There was not a trace of retribution or get back, or because he is a Brahmana. No, Kshatriyas may not do the same, and we may not do the same, but that was Jayadeva. He was interested in serving the world, and he's still serving the world through his writing of Gita Govinda. But those who are on an elevated platform, they're interested in being of service to all living entities, even those who are malicious. Now that he is pretty exceptional, pretty special personality, but that's part of his desire or disposition to be in service. Now there's another celebrated, commonly accepted detail of his life, Jayadeva's life, is during his lifetime, he was not always in Jagannath Puri. There was quite a stretch of time when he was living in Navadvip. At that time, Navadvip was a seat of high learning, and it was also something like the capital of that tract of land, now Bengal. It was a very celebrated place, several hundred years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. And the king of that area had a chief priest. The chief priest came to know that Jayadeva was in that area, and he informed the king, there's this amazing Vaishnav, and invite him to come. Said, hey, he doesn't like that kind of treatment. He won't come. He'll depart. So the king decided he'd take off his royal attire and go in regular garments and meet Jayadeva. It came out in the course of their discussion that he was the king. And Jayadeva was startled and announced to the king that I'm going to leave your kingdom. And the king pleaded and pleaded and pleaded. And I'll not visit you again. There's a nice place where you can stay. It became known later as Champahati because there was a large grove of champak trees. And so he made that his residence, and that's one of the places where he spent substantial time writing Gita Govinda. So his life was very colorful. For some of his life, he also spent in Vrindavan. We know that from the deity of Jayadeva Goswami is at the Radha Damodar temple. One of the sets of deities at the Radha Damodar temple is his deities. And there's a place by the side of Radha Kund where he also stayed. So he was an elevated Vaishnav. And his life, we can say, it was writing. The gift that Krishna had given him was the gift of writing. And the purpose of his writing was to honor Krishna. But the writings that honor Krishna, just like our founder Acharya, a great service that Srila Prabhupada rendered for the people of his time and the people of the next 10,000 years, as we like to say in ISKCON, was his writings, the Bhaktivedanta purports. And giving to the world knowledge of Krishna, genuine knowledge of Krishna, then this is the greatest of all services. And he wrote and he recited. Recently, I completed a nice set of discussions about the 6 Goswamis. And one of the 6 Goswamis, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, That was his main contribution. He didn't write books. At least they're not writings that are known. His main service was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. And his recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's described, was so attractive that it was the cuckoo birds would sit on branches nearby to hear his singing because his voice was so sweet. And it's not just cuckoo birds that came to hear him reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. It was many, many, many Vaishnavas. It's described that he achieved, as did Jayadeva Goswami, the stage of Prema Bhakti. And those who have attained that stage, the means and the end, come to the same place. Their desire, natural desire, is to share that same gift with others, the gift of Prema Bhakti, and through the medium, at least for writers and or reciters, is that sound vibration. As our founder Acharya gave his life breath to propagating the teachings of Krishna through his writings and his travels, etc. So we find the same example in the life of Jayadeva Goswami. So for those that weren't, it's said that even those that weren't devotees, just hearing the recitation of Gita Govinda from the lips of Jayadeva Goswami, that they became devotionally moved because he was a pure devotee, describing Krishna's wonderful qualities and pastimes. Very, very moving, very, very powerful Vaishnav, who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also very much appreciated, would regularly recite or have Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy recite verses from his Gita Govinda, as well as other great Vaishnavas preceding him. He was a delight for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to hear. Srila Prabhupada has given us at least one part of Gita Govinda by our Nishringa prayers just before this talk. It's one of the verses from Gita Govinda describing the Dasavatar stotras, and we sing one of them every time we have our worship, and often when we have our programs. We may not remember Jayadeva Goswami, but it's nice to remember such exalted persons because it's the gateway for us to remember Krishna. Their gift of giving love for Krishna through their writing is a great way to achieve Krishna's association and our natural love for Krishna. That's Vaishnav Seva of such an exalted Vaishnav. And Gopala Bhatta Goswami. Yesterday was the disappearance day of Gopala Bhatta Goswami. And there's a very memorable lecture. I remember hearing the recording shortly after it was given, when Srila Prabhupada was honoring Bhaktisiddhanta on his disappearance day in Seattle, long ago. But Prabhupada explained the reason why we honor somebody on their disappearance day. He said something very profound. He said, actually, nobody disappears. Because just as Krishna may make his appearance and disappear, but it's a pastime. So souls, the body may come and go, but the souls don't disappear. So the honoring of a disappearance day of a great Vaishnava is a great festival, because we know where they're going. A great Vaishnava is going to Krishna, so it's celebration worthy and an opportunity for us to remember these personalities. Therefore, they're marked in our calendar. Gopala Bhatta Goswami, from his early childhood, had Lord Chaitanya's mercy. The narration about his life reminds me, it's different, but it reminds me of Prahlad Maharaj, in the sense that when Prahlad was very, very young, even before Prahlad was born, it was understood by Narada that he was a great soul. And Gopal Bhatta Goswami, from his earliest childhood, was a great soul. And he received very specific mercy from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of the things, there's many things, one of the things I very much like about Gopal Bhatta Goswami was Lord Chaitanya's parting instructions. As we know, Gopal Bhatta was the son of Venkata Bhatta, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed in his house for 4 months. And he knew that he was the personality of Godhead. And he stayed in his house for 4 months. And the age range, his age is a little varied, different opinions, 8, 9, and 10, but between 8 and 10 years of age. Very young boy, very affectionate. And Lord Chaitanya, naturally, what happens when there's a young boy, very affectionate and very devoted, the mercy flowed. He had the opportunity for service, he had the opportunity for hearing, he had the opportunity for being in his direct association, and he became very attached, transcendentally attached. And when it was time for Lord Chaitanya to leave after the 4 months of the rainy season, he had the rest of his pastimes to perform. Gopal started crying uncontrollably. And Lord Chaitanya consoled him and instructed him, you stay and serve. He wanted to go with him. He's a little boy. Let me become your traveling companion. I'll serve you when you're traveling. Stay and serve your elderly parents. And when the time comes that they depart this world, then you go to serve Rupa and Sanatan, assist them. I've given them some mandates, and you go and assist them. Vaishnav Seva. And with that, he parted. Now, when Gopal Bhatta's parents left this world, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was still in Puri. Now, those of you that know your geography, from Tamil Nadu or from Sri Rangam, going north, Jagannath Puri. And he didn't go to Jagannath Puri. Why didn't he go to Jagannath Puri? To be with Lord Chaitanya, who was very, very transcendentally attached to. He understood his instruction was to go to Rupa and Sanatan and assist them. So he was still young, and young people can be a little impulsive sometimes, I've noticed. But he didn't. He was very dedicated to the instruction that Lord Chaitanya gave him. And Lord Chaitanya had informed Rupa and Sanatan that someday Gopal will come and you should treat him like a younger brother. Now he was young enough to be like their son, but treat him like a younger brother. So he was of a younger generation, just like Jiva Goswami was also in comparable age, but treat him like a brother. And so when he finally made it to Vrindavan, there they were, Rupa and Sanatan, and all the exalted Vaishnavas of the time received him with such happiness. Now, during that time that he was in Sri Rangam, as a young boy growing up, he wasn't lazy. He was a pure devotee with the empowerment of Lord Chaitanya fully upon him. And so he was busy writing and taking notes on his studies of the Bhagavatam. and his notes on deity worship, which later became essential parts of important Gaudiya Vaishnava literature, Hari Bhakti Vilas, and the outline at least, and there's different explanations of how much of the six Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami were from Gopal Bhatta's writings, or at least the structure came from Gopal Bhatta's writings. But in any case, he had his role in such important literature, foundational literature. That's Vaishnav Seva. Now, he didn't do Vaishnav Seva by doing the way Prabhupada did. He taking that literature and propagating it all around the world. He was laying the foundation for what we're doing today. And his mood, as with each of the six Goswamis, was amazingly humble. Amazingly humble. There's narration for each one of the six Goswamis, how incredibly, profoundly humble they were. We're just reading in Brihat Bhagavatamrita where Narada Muni in Dwarka speaks a very nice verse where abject humility is the best foundation for awakening the full blossoming of love, Krishna Prema. So all of the Goswamis had this characteristic. Naturally, where would there be, the sense of a spiritually elevated soul that was proud? That doesn't fit. So he was humble in a particular way. He also liked seclusion. And so the place of residence that was given to him was not so proximate to where Rupa and Sanatan had their main base, at least for some period of time, but over in the area of Nidhivan, which was some distance away. During this time, Vrindavan didn't look like it looks today, but it was, in fact, a little remote. But he liked it. And from there, he was doing his service to the Vaishnavas of commenting on and assisting Jiva Goswami, and of course celebrated for Gopal Bhatta was his worship, because he, after all, was the son of Venkata Bhatta. And he had, after Lord Chaitanya's departure, an important detail is Rupa and Sanatan sent a messenger with a message, informing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Gopal has arrived. And they were very happy. And they were describing his wonderful qualities. When Lord Chaitanya, it's described, when Lord Chaitanya received the messenger, he was in the middle of taking his meal. He stopped taking his meal and immediately began composing a letter to send back to Rupa and Sanatan and instruct him, and to Gopal Bhatta to instruct him. Imagine having some direct instruction from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what to do. Assist Rupa and Sanatan. And what were Rupa and Sanatan doing? Many things, but leading the Vaishnavas, so just assist them. So he was a foundational person with the work of the six Goswamis in Vrindavan. And he sent some gifts, personal paraphernalia, a wooden platform that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to sit on, and some upper garment like this one, and some kopins. And those items are still in safekeeping at the Radharaman temple. After Mahaprabhu's disappearance, he felt great anxiety. Naturally, everyone felt that same feeling. Mahaprabhu appeared to him in a dream and said, if you want my association, then you go make a pilgrimage to the Gandaki river. Long narration because of time, the details I won't go into, but as he was taking his bath in the Gandaki river, 12 Shalagram Shilas ended up in the pot that he was using for his bath. So he removed them from the pot, and there they were in the pot again, and 3 times that happened, and he understood, I meant to take them with me. And this way, he was able to, by worshipping his deity, these Shalagram Shilas, remember Krishna. Later, he felt some concern after the appearance of Radharaman from one of the Shilas. He was feeling, what am I doing? I'm worshipping Radharaman without worshipping Mahaprabhu. And so Mahaprabhu again appeared to him in a dream, indicating that when you see the deity, you will sometimes see me. By worshipping Radharaman, he was simultaneously worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In a transcendental sense, of course. But the nature of Gopala Bhatta Goswami was like any exalted Vaishnava, like any even smaller Vaishnava, but what to speak of an exalted Vaishnava, was fixed upon Krishna, and that fixed upon Krishna included a subset of being fixed upon Krishna as being in service to those who are related to Krishna. Of course, all souls are related to Krishna, but particularly the Vaishnavas. He was a perfect example of etiquette, perfect example of speech, perfect example of conduct, and he lived his life, a long life, as did each of the 6 Goswamis, completely devoted to to Lord Chaitanya's order of bringing the message of Krishna into the world. And he was an assistant in a humble way, not wishing his name to be mentioned, so it wasn't. You all know those stories from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Not to be mentioned in the Sandarbhas, not to be mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he liked it like that. And the devotees honored his liking. They were doing Vaishnava Seva that way too. But contributing to the Krishna consciousness of the people of his time and the people after his time. And so we're honoring the Vaishnava Seva in remembrance of Jayadeva Goswami and Gopala Bhatta Goswami. Now there's so many things to say, but my understanding is there's a end to the class and it's in 15 minutes, and so I thought it'd be nice to leave a little bit of time for discussion and see if there's anybody attending the call here or class who'd like to raise some topic for discussion. So who's our facilitator here? Whoever you are, you have to unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for this wonderful class. So I think I see Amara Mataji's hand up for a question. So Amara Mataji, you can just unmute and ask.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is how can we follow these great Vaishnavas without imitating them? And what is the difference of consciousness when one is following and when one is imitating? Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay, a how-to question. I'm quite familiar with how-to questions these days. You hear about them, remember them, pray to them, speak about them, making any contact or combination of those. And something out of all of that, besides just the elevation of consciousness that comes because they're so closely connected to Krishna that your connection with Krishna is made by hearing about them. It's equal to hearing about Krishna. In fact, as far as Krishna is concerned, it's more dear to him than hearing about him. But by hearing about them, remembering them, praying to them, speaking about them, besides purification and elevation of consciousness, there must be, if one is hearing nicely, there must be some particular quality in them that inspires you. And that quality in them that inspires you is something you can take something of a focus upon, that quality in them that inspires you. And hear more about that quality in them that inspires you and how it manifests in different ways in their lives. And you go a little deeper into that quality or characteristic of them. And as you do like that, it awakens that tendency within you, and that tendency then starts to come out. Of course, you can get distracted, like often happens. Not you, but anyone can become distracted, as it often happens, and you lose that thread. But even that which has become awakened a bit is never lost. It's a permanent asset for you spiritually. So to follow without imitating, I recently heard Prabhupada speaking, you can't imitate. Then he said, you can imitate, but it's foolish. So we're advised to not imitate, because who can do what Jayadeva did or what Gopala Bhatta did? We can't do. But we can look up to them, and as Mahaprabhu requested of Gopala Bhatta specifically, be an assistant in the mission and service that he had entrusted to Sanatana and Rupa Goswami. So you can see those personalities, those exalted personalities, and how they remind you of these great personalities like Sanatana and Rupa and the followers of Lord Chaitanya, and learn from their example and try to mold your life in that same fashion to your capacity. And that's service as opposed to imitating.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. It's very inspiring. Thank you.
Yeah, so Maharaj, I don't see any other hands raised for any questions so far. Nothing on YouTube as well.
Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to speak some words of appreciation of Jayadeva and Goswami and Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and the principle, their example of Vaishnav Seva. Hare